50 minutes to go. Welcome, everybody. Thanks for joining. You obviously have a dark side. I'm not really sure if it's appropriate to combine the British way of thinking and living with dark humor. I thought I'll put up some experiences of mine and present you the most common pitfalls to Java EE projects. It's not actually a way to die for you personally, but it could effectively kill your project. So that's why I'm going to talk about that. Okay, what qualifies me? My name is Markus. You probably know me as a MyFear on Twitter or some social media channels. I work in the industry for quite some time now. I believe it is a number with, it is a two number, so 12 years probably by now. I work in a research department for a German company. We're not that small. At the end of the day, it happens to me that I get phone calls from one of our 400 projects that we do in the Java EE space every year that wants me to save them. So I see a lot of projects. That's on an average, it's 30 projects per year. So, and they usually only call me when they actually see the wall in front of them while they are driving. So it's not like, let's take a right, stop and look for some help here. I mean, it's just get the hell out of here. But anyway, yeah. I'm an Oracle ACE director. I have some background on WebLogic, on Oracle technologies in general. Fusion Middleware is one of my beloved ones. I'm a little bit sad to see what happens to WebLogic at the moment. Who of you is using WebLogic Server? Just because I'm curious, okay. Glassfish? A little bit more. JBoss? Okay, and the rest is on web container stuff, Tomcat? Okay, thanks, perfect. I've seen them all. At least more than that, more than I would have loved to see. All the big three-letter application server vendors, yeah, and I solved problems around them. That was my initial draft, at least the bit you see on top at the bottom. Then it happens to me that I had to read the code of conduct. And I thought it would have been nice to present that kind of stuff, but I somehow had to make it more family friendly. So that is actually what you end up with if you're calling for a code of conduct. It's absolutely safe for all audiences. And the initial idea of that talk was to go through all the projects I see through a decent amount of code. We're talking about projects of any size, 1 million lines of code, 200,000 lines of code, and just collect some examples. But that's exactly the kind of talk I hate to see. I mean, that's getting boring, right? You see a lot of code, snippets, completely out of context, and it might not even be helpful. What to do with that talk? It was submitted and accepted. Let's think about it like this. There are not only 7 ways to kill your project, but it's more like a categorization of a more general kind. So you find a couple of things to avoid within any single of those categorizations. So, and if you look at a decent, very simplified overview at what we have today with a decent Java EE6 platform, then you see that the application is only part of your potential problems you could run into. Honestly, I'm not talking too much about the right side of that picture today, but just to make you aware that real critical Java EE applications of a decent size could have a couple of problems. And the application usually is the smallest one of those. So I'd say 30% of the stuff I get called on has to do with memory optimization, I/O stuff, hardware tuning, operating system tuning. So the application servers do great most of the time. What do we have now? We end up with having, let's say, 1 million ways to kill your project. I tried to highlight some of them in terms of giving you an idea to look at it. Okay, let's come back to that family-friendly theme. SpongeBob, yeah. He's the last person. It's actually, it's not my idea to give you SpongeBob comparison as a 7 deadly sins thing. The 7 main characters initially have been modeled after the 7 sins, so I just linked a website down there in the talk, so if you want to check back on that one. SpongeBob stands for lust. What does lust actually mean? It's not the physical thing we all think about. We shouldn't think about that. It's against the code of conduct. But it's a passionate desire for something, burning for something. Do whatever has to be done, right? Just here and now. I really like it. I'm probably a lusty guy, but there always is a negative side on that one. So if I look at those golden tabs, for example, we all have seen them. Stuff that really isn't helpful. Those user stories in your agile process that actually disturb you from getting real critical things done. That little UI tweak. But in that category also falls some features that you probably would like to see. But if you start asking yourself, how important is that actually? You need to figure out a good way to handle those potentially golden tabs. I had good experiences with coming up with some metrics about that one. So just try to get a feeling about which of those things that you would normally consider a golden tab are useful, helpful, which ones are critical. I've even seen that. I've seen applications that had high requirements on usability and UI design. As a developer, I would say, hey, I don't care, actually. I mean, it's UI, somebody else should do that. But you have situations where even that could be interesting. So it might be a thing to do. The hardest part is finding the right metric and the right level on making a good and solid decision on that one. That is my favorite. And yes, it's a thing of lust. Have you seen that? Potential seniors, might even highly motivated juniors, joining your team, trying to apply the gang of 4 patterns left to right. That happens. It still happens today. It's what I call over-engineering. We have a couple of those examples. I mean, it's not only the pattern thing. It's about how you apply them in the right way. What we've seen with J2EE, those ancient stuff from 1 million years ago, isn't that valid anymore today. We don't need more interfaces. And as Adam Bean puts it down, interfaces are actually not necessary any longer. So it's also a good sign of someone thinking too much about engineering skills and design. Tomorrow's problems, anticipation of things to come is also another good, really good thing to do. Focus on the problems you have today, try to solve them, and yeah, let everything else come onto you, especially if you're working on an agile project. And we are still talking about EE projects, so please don't apply that to medical devices or hardware development, right? So make sure nobody gets hurt and find the right level here. Premature Technologies. Who would use an alpha of something? None? Oh, that works better than expected. At JBoss, we have a decent amount of alphas that are final or stable in terms of APIs, but still haven't have a decent amount of documentation. So we could use an alpha 6 of Achillean without any issue at all. The only thing, they are missing some documentation. Would I use snapshots? No, definitely not. I've seen that. I've seen people pulling in daily snapshots of stuff and heavily relying their system logic on that one. So get a decent idea about the version numbering schemes that are behind the technologies you're using. Get a good feeling about the stability of those. Alpha isn't the baddest thing to have, especially not if you're looking in the open source space right next to JBoss. And it's always a good thing to actually know technologies you use. Let's try to figure out how many average dependencies you have in your Java EE projects. Who has roughly 10? Who has roughly 20? Whoa. Who has less than 10? And everything else more than 20? Unbelievable. Okay. Do you know any single of them? Yes, no? Okay, that's an exception. Most of the people start pulling in dependencies as they need them. And they don't even look at some transitive stuff. I've seen WAR files that have grown to 68 megabytes. We're definitely sure that this is absolutely unneeded. It has to be avoided, right? I mean, not only to make the whole deployment process and operation process a little bit easier, but just to copy that stuff and version that stuff. It's all space, it doesn't coast anymore, but it's no longer controllable if you ask me. So most of the time you find the same feature set in different libraries. So please, 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 if you're responsible of any kind in your project, check back with what the people are using. We all need some feedback on that one. Yeah, and remember, it's things for business we do. I have 15 to 20% of the overall applications we do that are, in the normal sense, mission critical. So some production systems are relying on that data. Some manufacturing plants couldn't work without them. So those 20% are really important. All the other rest simply has to fulfill business needs. So it's really not important to rely on the latest feature set of technology, but on a more stable thing. So just step a little bit back and please skip everything that looks fancy on the first sight. Get a decent feeling for it. That is a little bit next to the not invented here syndrome. I hate to admit, but it is still out there. I've seen plenty of frameworks. It's gotten better over the years, but still we have so many things that have been especially built for that single use case. It's a thing of lust to do it. And I think you should try to avoid that. So make a good guess, make a good analysis about the things that already exist out there, take it into account, and just use it. You could even think about contributing to that stuff. Most of the libraries we use is open source. So if you find something that is really close, let's say 90% of the features, and you're missing 10%, just think about contributing. That works. And those stuff will work for you sooner or later. Enough on preaching about lust. Let's look at gluttony. Gary, yeah. You could think about what you like, but he's not doing anything in the series without mowing and eating everything, and that is a good symbol for things in application development that has to do with gluttony. Performance, one of my favorites. 50 concurrent users on one node. That's not good. Something is wrong there. But it could actually happen. Performance is a non-functional requirement. You actually have to take into account. How many of you do write non-functional requirements, including performance down? How the hell do all the rest of you, the architecture, define the architecture? without looking at performance, without knowing the requirements. I don't have a clue. It's not that you're alone out there, right? I mean, most of the projects I see, most of them calling me, thankfully not in the middle of the night, but they don't even know about their performance requirements, but at some point in time they get a call from the customer, this thing isn't spinning anymore, get that fixed. What exactly does, okay, you got the message. It's also good to look at different kinds of performance. We're not talking about runtime performance alone, but you also have something called developer performance. So there are some fancy little tools out there that could support and improve your developer process. Some redeployment stuff that a nice little company that is in the exhibition hall also provides. So, I mean, yeah, do something about performance. Take care for performance. Enable your team to be a performant team. Yeah, and caching, completely off topic. Caching also has to do with performance, right? That is a common pattern. What do I do if it's not performant enough? I try to throw in some caching. And most of the time, this caching is developed lustily from scratch. So nobody is thinking about solutions that are already out there. It's sad to see that caching didn't make it into EE7, and I'm still hoping for them to make it into EE8. So don't cache too much. Use the tools you have, and definitely think about the amount of caching that could be helpful. Memory is my favorite. I know it's a terrible slide. I'm not going to read it point by point. You could easily come up with another 20 things to avoid with memory. We still have limitations, even with today's systems. Memory consumption is an issue. Profile your applications. It's easy. NetBeans has a wonderful profiler integrated. Just use it. And the more often you use it, the handier it gets. Yes, you have to learn a little bit about profiling and brush up your skills on that one. It's not easy to read stack traces, but and not easy to read profiling results, but at the end of the day, it's worth it. Definitely worth it. Another good thing is, don't ever try to outsmart the JVM. They know what those guys are doing. Every single line you've ever read about optimizing your code to run faster on JVMs is more or less a myth. They are doing the best they can do to make your code look the best in bytecode. So there's hardly a single thing you could do to optimize that process. Stop doing it. It's wasting your time. And yes, you have an application server, right? That thing is designed for taking care of memory. So whatever the application server provides that is close to the spec, use it, please. HTTP sessions. Does everybody knows the average session size of their applications? I've seen sessions that grew to 85 megabyte. A single fucking session. It's not a good idea, we all agree. It's most likely only a little small IDE that helps you keep track of different requests. So, no, it's not your hidden in-memory cache for all the object trees you're willing to fetch from the database eagerly. Not, please. I mean, it's just a little tiny helper. If you really have the need for having large amounts of information in the session object, find a better way. Find some links, find some caching solutions out there. All the new technologies we have, including JSF, doesn't foster session size, small session sizes. So the technology itself improves. Everything we could do to free up some memory here is a good thing. And yes, it's actually memory that you don't have for executing your application, because it allocates stuff that the server should use for running your application and not for hosting a couple of sessions. And the default session lifetime is far too long. Infrastructure. yeah, I mean, they have nuts and bolts and tweaks and things, every little application server out there, even the big ones, know what they are doing. We had a couple of great ideas. I've come across WebLogic configurations that actually had a configured database pool size of 60 and 15 assigned working threads. Imagine how many connections to the database would be possible. Definitely not 60, right? So there are some correlations you should know about. You should know what your infrastructure is looking like, what you're capable of running. And please, please, trust your application server a little bit more. Don't come up with your own solutions for problems they already solve. They have some really good solutions. And never, ever, ever try to work with your own threads, please. Mr. Squidward. Mr. Squidward is definitely cool. He's someone I've seen out there a little, some of the time, in different facades and shades. So he's, is he British? No, I shouldn't have asked that, right? I don't know. It's not the obviously violent guy, but the one with a very dark humor, undergoing all your efforts to build up a good team. And he wants problems to be solved his way. And the best thing is, he takes whatever he knows, puts it into that stuff. Even if he's developing a Java EE application, he is tempted to use other heavyweight frameworks, might even be Spring, just because of that tiny little feature. He knows the way that one framework solves his problem, and he just throws it in there. There are so many great things out there, so many great new things. Play, Scala. Please have a careful look at what you're mixing. Be very sure that it works for you and is not only an overhead. It's not a good sign to combine whatever you know. It's a good sign just to learn a little bit about the limitations and fix the stuff that's missing. Yes, it's very obvious. The right tool for the right job. This is definitely all I'm asking for. Just have a look. My favorite still is threading and concurrency. I don't know, I've seen everything. Some people launching threads, runnables in servlets. Unbelievable. It was never ever designed to be like that. EE was designed to just take that burden from you. You just had to have a decent runtime environment where you could facilitate everything that the application server gives you. And you don't have to care about threads or pool sizes at all. I mean, it's simply there. Don't, please, ever, never roll your own threading stuff. If you have to, there are some very rare reasons to do that. You could rely on the JCA connector architecture. From a build point of view, it's not a good thing to have. But if you need it, put it there, please. If you do something, the application server simply doesn't know anymore what your application is consuming in terms of threads. So you're hurting yourself. E7 will have, hopefully, some more improvements there and will map some of those concepts into the EE world and make it container controlled. So we have some kind of progress there. And yeah, we recognize that this is needed. That could be helpful, but at the moment, including E6, please don't. Simply don't. Maintainability. We have some subsidiaries that do software in terms of boxes that customers can actually buy. Big heavyweight stuff, products for industries, banking, whatever. And what's the number one complaint? It's not maintainable, right? I mean, it's software. Maintainability is a wonderful aim to reach. And there's probably only one thing that stands between you and maintainability, and that's the complexity of the thing. Some of this stuff is 15 years old. Those are legacy code bases. Be sure that this is no longer maintainable. It's hard to design for maintainability. You could do that. You need a real big background on that one, some real good experiences. A first good step is to reduce complexity wherever you seize it. In general, it's a rule of thumb. If you use modern EE technologies, try to be simple as possible. It should be a rule everywhere, but I like to put that back on your agenda just to look after that one. Mr. Crab is the management kind of guy, right? He's looking after the money, and if someone is wasting his money, he's going to fire him, not saving the world. Greed is, I don't know how many times in the past few years I came across the situations that we, including me, are not actually treated as people contributing, but simply resources with a, sometimes not even with a decent skill tag on it. Oh, you have time? Just jump in there. They need a security specialist. Whoa, okay, that happens. We should be aware of that one. I tend to agree that management actually doesn't know about skills. I'm not sure. Sometimes it feels like that. We are not that resource thing, and I don't get tired pointing that out to my management if they try to put me in some offensive situations. Another good thing is to have a decent team size. So I don't know if you can influence that at all. That's probably the good part with my firefighting things I do. I could at least make some recommendations about things to do, to change, to make it flow better, to run better. So team size should be the right size. And it also is very important to keep an eye on the many features. Scrum and Agile, everything perfect if we do it, but nobody prevents us from putting too many things in sprint backlogs and product backlogs. That happens day to day. So just try to be aware of that one. And another math thing is 2 juniors doesn't make a senior. But that happens to me quite a lot. That management says to me, okay, you're requiring a person that has a decent skill set. I don't have it, but I get you 2 for 1. Doesn't work. Some tools out there have to be licensed. Not only from Oracle, from innovative companies. Why not? We need them. And if they bring us forward, good example is IntelliJ. Bring that project to IntelliJ. Bring that to the products that actually return value for what you invest. It's not good to not invest that and do Eclipse left to right only because it's free. If it's not fitting, if you have special requirements, look out for tools that solve those. And I hate to see small developer notebooks. But that's also part of that story, right? I mean, that's all about money saving. And back to the topic, yes, we're still talking about EE projects. It's actually that I've seen those situations where projects got killed by restrictions in that kind of area. As I said, it's never a binary thing, so you won't pick any of those and make your product, your project fail, but they all add to the mix, right? Mr. Plankton. Can you see him? He's so small. He's jealous like hell, right? This guy wants to run his own business, drive Mr. Krabs out of the way. Where are we jealous? We have some weaknesses in the specification. There are some black holes. I recently discovered one that I really don't like. You can't inject an EJB into a JOGS RS endpoint, into a plain endpoint. You could inject it in terms of CDI, but you couldn't use the EJB annotation. At least if you look in the specification. If you look at OpenEJB, that works. If you look at Glassfish, it doesn't work. Those are really, really corner cases and some specification tweaks. At the end of the day, all server-specific features. And the more commercial products grow, the more valuable server-specific features you most often find. Be careful using them. It's definitely killing you multiple times if you're not committed to that platform. You will probably start having problems when that server updates its version, because it's not backed by an industry standard or spec. It's most likely going to change. You will absolutely have problems when the server have a major version switch, or when you're definitely going to switch onto open source from a commercial thing. So yeah, have a look out. And as the example shows, it's the tiny little things, right? Even if you use JPA and have Hibernate, do all of you know which ones are the Hibernate-specific things? Do all of you really check every single import you do to the classes? Most of the people I see tend to forget about that over time. I need that freaking feature. It's there. Why shouldn't I use it? So that happens. Somebody has to look after that. And it's not only the weakness, the additional APIs we have in app servers, but you can look everywhere to find those examples. Patrick, I could like him. Getting an award for doing absolutely nothing probably wouldn't have brought me here, but my wife would be happy because I could be at home. Anyway, yeah, he's doing nothing. I mean, let's talk about that one. We want to be efficient. Some people say if you're lazy, you get efficient in doing things. That is definitely right. So don't mix up doing nothing with being lazy and efficient here. But not taking care of your code, not doing refactorings, not trying to reuse the right things definitely is not good. Copy and paste, I mean, the example itself, there are so many tools out there that do some static quality checks that could find those duplicates. Who of you is using any kind of static code checks? Well, that's roughly the half, right? Okay, the other half, have a look at it. You would be surprised how many duplicate code you find, and with every duplicate you have to fix the stuff twice if a bug comes up, okay? Try to improve yourself, try to improve your team, try to be better, don't be lazy in a negative way, try to be effective. Sandy, the beautiful Sandy. I'm not sure if she's still in the series. I had to bring her into the game. She's part of the original figures. She's Pride, as we all are, probably. But being Pride and confident doesn't mean not taking care for something, right? Even if we're the smartest guys out there, we shouldn't do anything without test stuff. We shouldn't do anything that isn't backed by anybody. And testing is a good example here. I mean, as I was collecting those different kind of tests, I was asking myself, are we doing that with every project we run? No, definitely not. But we have a decent set of that. We have a decent code coverage, and that saves my ass plenty of times. So just check back if you have all the tests up and running that you actually need. My favorite mistake is that we don't have real security testing. Most of our unit tests run with kind of admin permissions. So the famous do all, can do all user is running all the tests. But the simplest of those tests is failing if I have a user with a restricted set of rights. I haven't seen that very often in the past, that people actually do test security down to that level. Last but not least, even if there's plenty of time left, development is a team effort. And that's also true for Java EE projects. So it's not about being the almighty architect out there, knowing everything. Even if I used to call myself an architect, I'm not sure if I'm proud about that one. I mean, I couldn't do a single thing without a good team on board with every of those projects I see, I run, we run. So don't be the one. Don't be too proud and say you know everything. It's a good idea to just be around, guide younger people, but don't expect yourself to be the only one knowing about everything. Fire up your questions if you have. I know I'm missing a couple of examples, but I've plenty of them. If you have things you would like to ask me about, just fire them up. Otherwise, thanks for your attention. I hope it wasn't too boring. Simon. Right. Are things getting better or worse? And if so, why? Looking at the EE specification, we had a decent shift from the cloud things to developer productivity. I like it. I'm part of the expert group. I actually was in favor of that move. I think that developer productivity, usefulness of specifications is a good thing to have and prevents a lot of failures. I mean, if I look back to Java EE, J2 EE 1.4, all the interfaces, has anybody of you done that stuff, J2 EE, back in the days? I mean, I showed that stuff to some students we had at our department, and they were laughing. They didn't even have a clue what to do. The drawback here is nobody actually knows about Corba or remoting. I mean, that stuff is still happening down there, but it's well hidden. And that's a good thing if you don't have to debug that. So yes, it's getting better. I like it. Developer productivity is a big part of that game. I think that we simply need to be a little bit faster in adopting decent standards. Any more? Sorry? Okay, how do I identify golden tabs and what are our metrics? We have some very fancy Excel sheets about that one. It's not called the golden tabs Excel, so it's more or less the storyboard. We do a lot of team efforts to identify things that are important or not. You should have some kind of product manager on board who's able to help you identifying that stuff. As a technician, there is no good reason to deny implementation of it or not. I mean, you could simply put those estimates up for things you don't like. That works from time to time, but I'm a big fan of just being transparent. So if somebody asks me, what are the alternatives? Am I the dumb one seeing that this complicated thing isn't needed, or do you have some special reasons? So it's a lot about communication, understanding the business domain you're working in. I know it don't really burns down to a handful of metrics I could simply tell you. Thank you. Get yourself a coffee.